Yeah, my camera's not going to stay on my steering wheel. So, I just got back from PorcFest late last night. It's about 1,000 miles, 1,050 miles, I think, via car. And I thought I'd do a little PorcFest postscript. This is my first PorcFest. I've known about the event for quite a while. I'm pretty sure not from the beginning. I definitely have mixed feelings about it. It was mostly good. There wasn't anything terrible or anything like that. Most of my information about PorcFest came basically from Free Talk Live, which is a show that I don't really listen to very much now. But there were times in the past when I listened to it more frequently. Basically, whenever I'm unemployed, I'll listen to stuff like that a lot more, and I'll listen to a lot of different podcasts. And when I am employed, that stuff basically almost completely stopped. Usually, it does completely stop. But so, if you listen to the Free Talk Live version of PorcFest, it is this amazingly cathartic experience for libertarians, and it's just an unmitigated positive event, and perhaps it is for some libertarians, but I didn't find it that way. It didn't make me instantly want to move to New Hampshire. That's still something that I consider, but not very seriously at this point. And I don't think that PorcFest really changed that view. The most interesting thing about PorcFest really was not related to libertarianism at all. It was just the kind of the surreal experience of meeting people you've known online, in some cases for years, for the first time in real life. That's a very unusual experience. It's not one that I've had very much. You know, most people I've either known all my life, or I got to know them personally before I ever knew them digitally. A few times I've been introduced to people online only to meet them very shortly thereafter. But in this case, there were YouTube users and Facebook people and that I hadn't, ever met, but that I'd known literally for years. And meeting them for the first time was a very rewarding and interesting experience. That's sort of akin to meeting like a celebrity. Now, there weren't any national celebrities there, but there were quite a few people that among the libertarian community, they are celebrities. And that is kind of interesting to see Stefan Molyneux walking around, or Dan D'Amico, or Ben Powell, or Robert Murphy. Just to see those people in real life is kind of a little bit weird. It's not life-shattering or life-changing, it's just kind of interesting. The other thing that was probably the second most interesting, other than meeting people I'd known for a long time, is just meeting new people. YouTube user Legal Immigrant, who I spent quite a bit of time talking with, introduced me to kind of his group of friends. Basically, he described it as the New York clique, a clique of New York anarcho-capitalist libertarians, and they were all pretty cool guys, pretty knowledgeable guys. I'd say on net they were a lot more well-informed than the average person at PorcFest. Pretty cool guys. Would have been nice if Mr. Pritchard had been there, but whatever. Maybe next time. I met some cool guys from Chicago, and probably from a few other places as well. And this is kind of, in conjunction with that, makes me think that all this, everyone needs to come to New Hampshire, is kind of not a great idea, because even if they are smaller, the various gatherings of libertarians around the country, of which there's really probably hundreds or thousands of ones that could be mentioned, are really important. I know in mine, I don't live in New York City, but there is an anarcho-capitalist clique in my little tiny Michigan town. It's not a tiny Michigan town. I think there's about 10,000 people in my town. And I started going to a Young Americans for Liberty, which is de facto anarcho-capitalist. Everyone there either was or shortly became an anarcho-capitalist. And there are probably, in the last 2 years, there's probably been, I don't know, maybe a dozen or 2 dozen people who have been involved in that group. And they really do serve a very important function, in that people who start to become interested in the ideas, it's very, very good for them to go and meet other people, to bounce off ideas, to think that they're not crazy. And very few people are just going to jump in their car and go to New Hampshire to do that. I actually met a few people who have done that. Interestingly enough, I saw a guy walking around with a t-shirt from my local college, or the one I went to anyway, and I got talking to him, and he literally graduated from school, jumped in his car from school. He didn't even go back to his hometown and drove to New Hampshire and joined the Free State Project. And he did that all based on the fact that he listened to Free Talk Live. Most people don't do that. And it's very good for them to be able to come someplace locally and discuss politics, discuss philosophy, discuss economics, to vent. That's an important thing. And those organizations, if they're thought-provoking, can get people a lot better educated. Because one thing that really surprised me about PorcFest, maybe the biggest surprise, was the level of ignorance. Now, that's not to suggest that there weren't a ton of very smart, very knowledgeable people there. There were, more than you're going to find in any other gathering. But there were also a large number of people who really didn't know anything, or very little, or they had a very kind of quirky mix of absurd ideas. And that strikes me as very odd, because these are people who are either in the Free State Project or came to PorcFest, and unless they were locals, and there was some of this, there were basically buddies or friends of people who were involved who were not really in any conceivable stretch libertarian, who just are kind of showing up. And I guess that's fine, but that kind of detracts from the event a little bit, in the sense that you can't point to it and say it's this libertarian extravaganza and say, oh, we've got thousands of people, when, 10% or 20% of them aren't libertarians at all and are just kind of there to have a good time and go camping. And in no way should their presence be an indication for the advancement of a libertarian movement, to the extent that such a thing even exists. But beyond those people, there were quite a few people there who, I hesitate even to call them libertarians. I got into a rather heated discussion one night with a guy who was for tariffs, for closed borders, for a fiat digital currency. He was against gold. He was against, and it was like, what the hell is this guy doing here? Did he just accidentally come to the wrong place? And that wasn't it at all. So that really surprised me, and I think that people who show up so flippantly, and I mean that in the sense that they don't really know what they're getting into, but they show up anyway, that's a sign that they're making decisions emotionally or whatever. That they're, hey, this sounds good, I'm going to go with it, which isn't always bad, but it also doesn't mean that we should count them and say, okay, look, we've got a serious libertarian here. It's just that person, that's the same kind of person who could very easily just see a good Obama speech or whatever. And I saw an interview with a guy who works for the DNC, raising money for them, and admitted to his lust for power, and yet he's at a PorcFest. I'm not saying they shouldn't be invited or anything like that. I don't think that the event, to its credit, doesn't lend itself to restricting large numbers or classes of people, although they did actually like to ostracize some people. But I think that its overall importance is a little overemphasized. So I do think, in my subscribers out there, if you are not in a local group at all, and I don't mean like every week or anything, I just mean maybe once a month sort of thing, I highly, highly, highly recommend finding one. If you live in the United States, it should not be difficult. There are Campaign for Liberty, Young Americans for Liberty, Ron Paul Meetup, Libertarian Party, just about in every county. If you live way out in the middle of nowhere, perhaps it can't work, but if I can find them in my city of 10,000 and find several of them, then so can you. Whenever I've lived in Texas, it's been a very easy matter to just look up the Young Americans for Liberty, and you go there, and it's usually an ANCAP festival, and that's really important. And my little group, it's not my group because it's existed a long time before me. I just go to it sometimes. Actually, not very often now that I work out of state. But they got together and they all went to the Mises Institute one year. So they they are very much, they're very educated and pretty knowledgeable, and that's not something you universally see at PorcFest. Now, the next interesting thing is there were a large number of lectures given by the invited guests, and the invited guests, I think, varied quite a bit in caliber, which I guess is going to happen. The intellectual ones, like Dan D'Amico, like Ben, what's his name? Ben Powell, Robert Murphy, they were pretty thought-provoking, and whenever they gave a lecture, they would address whatever it was that was being discussed. People like Stefan Molyneux and Ernie Hancock, they're smart guys too, but they basically are media people, and they have kind of the same shtick that they give over and over and over again. Every question that Stefan Molyneux gets is going to come back to the gun in the room every time, even if it's completely irrelevant. And that gets real boring. The other interesting thing about it was to get to know people like that, or to observe them in a non-media setting. So like Adam Kokesh was there, and Austin Peters, who was Judge Napolitano's producer on Freedom Watch, and a couple other people. And I didn't talk to them specifically, but you spend the whole week there, and you kind of get a lot of opportunities to observe them when they're not on camera, and see what they're like, and see who's got a different persona for the audience, at least, and ones who don't. And Kokesh seemed, although I didn't speak with him, he seemed like the guy you see on TV is the guy who is there. Austin Peters, I respect him, but I think he has certain issues. I don't want to get into too much, but if you were at PorcFest and you saw the conspiracy debate, which he won the conspiracy debate, but some of the things he said came out. I mean, there are big issues with some of the things that he said. I don't want to get into him too much. If anyone wonders what I'm talking about, you can go ahead and ask in the comments. And also Jeff Berwick. Okay, I've listened to his YouTube channel. It's called Anarchast for a long time, and I gotta say, that guy is. I fucking did not like his speech at all, and I didn't like his attitude. And I mean, I went up and talked to him before his speech, and said, "Hey, I watched your interviews, and good for you, and whatever." And he just seemed kind of, okay, whatever. I don't feel like talking to you, which is fine. I don't like to hound people, and so I didn't. But that's not what pissed me off. What pissed me off was his speech. Just to give you some idea, he said quite a few things. His speech was about how to live. And I don't want to make this into like a Jeff Berwick bashing thing, but the entire point of his lecture was like how to live free or whatever. Which, hey, great. And basically he says, well, first thing you do is you get a citizenship in one country that doesn't tax money you don't earn in that country. Then you go live in another country that doesn't tax you if you're not a citizen. And then you have your passport in a third country and blah, blah, blah. And then when you want to start a business, all you have to do is bribe every single bureaucrat that ever wants a piece of your business so that you don't have to pay taxes, although paying bribes would then in effect be taxes. And if we have any kind of customs problems, then you just pay. Basically, this step, he had like a 5-step program, but it was really a 6-step program. And the first step that he neglected to put in there was literally be a millionaire. And he is a millionaire apparently. And what he was talking about is completely useless to anyone who doesn't have millions of dollars to go. I mean, it is possible to get, say, and his citizenship is in the Dominican Republic. But you can't just get a citizenship in the Dominican Republic. You can't just show up and say, I want to be a citizen. It costs many thousands of dollars in lawyers' fees. And if you want to do it real fast like he did, you have to have even more to get it expedited. Otherwise, it doesn't necessarily just happen. I mean, at one point he goes, oh, and my neighborhood's real nice. There's no problem. There's no crime here. I don't know. Why do you Americans think there's so much crime in Mexico? There's no crime where I live. All my neighbors are millionaires and billionaires. Well, geez. All I got to do is become a millionaire or billionaire, and then I can live anywhere I want, and it won't matter. I mean, most of us don't have that luxury. And there's a certain disconnect that I don't think he realizes, that what he's talking about is way beyond our means. Sure, if you're a millionaire or billionaire in the United States, you basically can live free. I mean, you can live free anywhere if you're a millionaire or a billionaire. And then he said something, and I don't begrudge him for being rich, but I think it shows a lack of understanding on his part that he would think that he's giving meaningful advice. And his attitude about it just seems to be like, why? And if you watch his videos, he's always saying, why does everyone want to live in America? Everyone should live in Mexico. Well, not everyone can live in, the upscale part of Acapulco. If a lot of people move to Mexico, they may end up living in an area that's not so safe, where the police aren't going to apologize if they give you a ticket. I mean, he talked about having his car towed, and they just figured he was rich, so they brought it back and apologized. Okay, that's not the treatment most people are going to get. And then he said, I hate America. In America, if I shoot somebody and kill somebody, I'll get in trouble. But in Mexico, if I kill someone, all I have to do is pay a little money and the problem will go away. That's fucking messed up. That's bullshit. To just talk about how it's good to be able to just murder somebody and then just walk away from it like it's not even a big deal. And that the problem with the United States is that murder isn't treated flippantly. There's a lot of problems with the justice system in the United States and how it addresses murder. But the fact that it's against the law and that they would, presumably prosecute somebody unless, say, Ted Kennedy, that's not a problem with it. And that really sounded terrible and was terrible. And I know he was a little drunk when he said it, but come on. I mean, he really struck me as a guy who's a millionaire or a billionaire. He's a wealthy person. He really doesn't want to be bothered by anybody else. He wants to live in luxury, which is all that's fine. And he found this philosophy called libertarianism about that basically says you should be allowed to do that, which it does. And so he likes that philosophy. But that philosophy also says other things like you shouldn't commit aggression. And that would include just shooting somebody and killing them. So my opinion of Jeff Berwick went from I didn't really know anything to fairly negative. Although, to be honest, I don't think he's that well known. I guess I only knew him through his YouTube, and I guess he's really better known through his website or whatever, which I don't remember what it's called. So I think, but I mean, some of the lectures were very interesting. There are a couple things that I learned, and I'm going to make a couple independent videos. I am going to make a video on Bitcoin. People have asked me about Bitcoin before, and really I was pretty ambivalent about it. I didn't know very much. There are Bitcoin vendors there. There are a number of lectures that were either explicitly about Bitcoin or talked about Bitcoin. I think the most informative single panel I went to was the Bitcoin panel. I'll make a whole separate video about that. I have just the short of it is I am very intrigued by Bitcoin, and with qualification I have started investing in it. I spent money when I was there. I bought some Bitcoins, and my intention is to buy some more. I'm not converting all my gold or silver. In fact, I specifically asked that, should I? Well, I didn't say should. I said I'm not. When I went to buy them, I said I'm not going to change all my stock from gold and silver into Bitcoin, and even the vendors like that's probably wise. But I'll make a whole video just about that. That was probably the most thought-provoking single element. Dan D'Amico said some pretty interesting things. Ben Powell said some pretty interesting things. Bob Murphy said interesting things, but I'd heard him say them before. But there was a lot. The format of PorcFest is a little convoluted. First of all, there are multiple events going on at the same time, and I think that's necessarily going to happen because otherwise the events would be too long or they wouldn't be able to have as many people involved. But it means you're kind of jumping around a lot. And you're just kind of, and it's kind of an open door. It's not like when you would go to a lecture, like you'd go in and you'd be stuck there. It would be in an open pavilion and you could be in and out. But there are lots of cool things. Like they had a lot of agorism. The food was excellent. Well, one thing I will say, the Free Talk Live, I remember Ian Freeman would always say, you don't even need to bring food because the vendors here will take care of you pretty well. And that's what I did. I brought some water and some soda. and that's all I needed. And the George's famous baklava or whatever, the Agarist Greek chef, their food was pretty good. I love their gyros and their omelets, and that pretty much got me through the week. And it was actually pretty good eating. I guess everything you could possibly want wasn't available, but that's never the case. So that was as advertised. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, it was good to meet all those people. A couple people asked, you know, are you going to come again next year? And I said, I don't know. I'm not feeling the intense desire to make sure that it happens. But we'll see. I guess it would be kind of fun as a tradition to come again. I think I'd probably want to get better arrangements. This time I actually slept in my truck, in the truck I'm sitting in right now. That's where I slept, which isn't terrible, but it's not that comfortable either. So I don't know how many times I'd want to do that. So yeah, so I'm gonna make because of what I heard, I'm gonna make a video about Bitcoin. I'm gonna make a video about Stefan Molyneux. I'm going to make a video about who is a libertarian and who is not a libertarian, because that's another issue that came up. And I have to make a video about war. I met Angela Keaton from Anti-War Radio, who I had a fairly brief correspondence with over YouTube. And she said some pretty interesting things in her talk. She gave me a book that she'd come out with. I don't know if I'm going to read the book before I make the video or not, but she specifically requested that I make a video about war. I will. The last video I made on... Oh yeah. The video I made on libertarian book suggestions, I did not mention war, and I got some heat for that, understandably. Oh, and so here's the other interesting thing. I can't believe I forgot this. Boston Tea Party was there. Boston Tea Party, who wrote Boston's Gun Bible and The Hologram of Liberty, both of which I recommend as libertarian books. He's been a very influential author on me. He was there. I got the chance to talk with him a couple of times. He heads up basically Free State Wyoming, which is the competitor sort of with the New Hampshire Free State. And he was a very interesting guy to talk to. He apparently is a guy who, how do I say this? He advocates that people become a certain archetypal human, basically a hardcore ideological libertarian, but also someone who is something of a badass. Strong proficiency in weaponry, especially guns, either handguns, rifles, and shotguns, but even in knife throwing and personal combat. And he, as far as I can tell, has made himself exemplify those things to a pretty advanced degree. At least that was my take on it. Just reading him, he doesn't come out and boastfully say those things, but a lot of the things that he writes, it kind of comes across that way. And meeting him in person, it comes across that way, and that was quite an experience. So I was very happy to get to talk to him a couple times. And just on a side note, the book that I recommended that people read, The Hologram of Liberty, he just came up with a 100-page longer version of it 2 weeks ago. So I bought a copy of that, and if anyone was going through my libertarian book list and was going to buy it and hasn't yet, make sure you get the new edition, because it will be longer and better. So I don't think I really need to do a video about him, but yeah, definitely Bitcoin, Stefan Molyneux. I don't know when I'll do war and who's going to be a libertarian. Another question also, while I was there, I got a big bump in subscriptions. I haven't checked because I haven't checked the email since I got home, but I've had about a 10% increase in the number of my subscribers, which for me is like a huge, I think that's the second biggest bump I've ever had, other than when KDOTECA pimped me out in January. And that's cool, but it's frustrating because I have absolutely no idea why it happened. I didn't release a video really during that time, and so if anyone, I mean, did somebody give me a shout out, or did somebody post my video somewhere where it got views? I don't mind. It's just I'm kind of curious. If somebody did, I'd like to thank them for it. YouTube is kind of a mysterious thing, and I don't really understand how and why things happen. You know, one of my most viewed videos now is a video about the Order of the Arrow, the Boy Scout secret society. And you know, I made that video last fall. Very few people watched it. Most of my subscribers are understandably not terribly interested in Boy Scouts, and I think it sat at about like 40 views for 6 months, and then it just suddenly started getting more and more, and now I think it has more than 1,000, which is not, you know, usually you release a video and your subscribers watch it and you get a bump at the beginning and then that's it. And why that video started trending, I don't know, other than I found that it was showing up in the sidebar of an even more popular video about the Order of the Arrow. And why it suddenly appeared there, I don't know, because the video it appeared next to has been online for a long time. And somehow it just ended up being in the related videos, and I'm assuming, although I don't know, that I've just been getting related traffic. And then I wonder, well, why the hell doesn't that happen to my other videos? Because in general, I don't get... I think I only have 2 videos with 1,000 views, and that's one of them. And that's, of all the videos I have, that would be like towards the very bottom of my list of videos that I'd want to have viewed a lot. But anyway, if anyone knows, like if anyone gave me a shout out, and typically people give me shout outs, they don't say anything. And so I don't even know to say, hey, thank you for doing that. Or if somebody posted the video, I heard that my videos were posted on the New York Clique so-called Facebook page, but I don't know if that's true or not. So anyway, if anyone knows, please let me know. I probably shouldn't have asked that at the end of the video. That means only 50% of the people who watch the video will actually see that question, but if anyone knows, please let me know. And that's pretty much it. And alright, that's it.